Hello and welcome to Stanley Studio Visits with Grant Wood Fellow Margarita Blush. I'm Kimberly Datchett, Curator of Learning and Engagement at the Stanley Museum of Art. The Stanley's virtual programs this year are supported by a generous donation by Yvonne McGabe. We are recording tonight's visit and it will be available on the Stanley's YouTube page. This event is closed captioned. You can turn on the captions by selecting View Subtitles under the More menu option. Tonight's program is informal, so if at any point you'd like to ask a question, you can put it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask Margarita. Margarita Blush is a Bulgarian-American theater artist. She holds an MFA in performance and an MFA in directing for puppet theater from the National Academy for Theater and Film Arts, Sofia, Bulgaria, and a certificate in Lecoq-based pedagogy from Embodied Poetics, London, UK. She is the artistic director of Margarita Blush Productions, an ensemble-based company that creates and performs original work. Blush's latest production, Unfolding, 2015, has been performed at festivals and venues in the US, Bulgaria, and Turkey. In spring 2019, the show was performed at the Tank in New York City to great critical and audience acclaim. In summer 2019, as a recipient of an Asian Cultural Council individual fellowship, Blush traveled to Japan for 8 weeks to study traditional Japanese theater forms. Blush works as a director, performer, and teacher in the field of devised theater. Her work blends live acting, puppetry, movement, conceptual design, and original live music to produce imaginative and thought-provoking theater experiences for audiences. Her work challenges traditional, institutionalized, and commercial theater creation while engaging audiences with content that examines contemporary social and cultural values. While a Grant Wood Fellow, Blush is developing a new show, The Rule of the World, set to premiere in the 2021-2022 season. Thank you for inviting us into your studio practice tonight, Margarita. I'll turn it over to you.
So the talk is over. Kimberly said everything about me, and it was really good to meet you. Bye-bye, everyone. Okay, all joking aside, before I even begin, I want to say one thing. I do hope that this is an exchange. So please, at any time, if you have a question or something is not clear, please let me know. I would love to engage in exchange of ideas versus just me talking. And furthermore, before we begin, because I am a practitioner of a very embodied practice, that is a very mindful practice, I would like to invite you on 1 minute, I'll try to keep it to a minute, very, very, very simple embodiment. So I will invite you to close your eyes for this and just listen to my voice, just listen to my instructions and do them to the best of your ability. So just take a couple of deep breaths and feel that you're arriving in your body. It is late in the evening. It was probably a long day, or maybe it wasn't, who knows. It was a day. And arrive right here, right now. And when I work with students or with performers, I always say, let's take the privilege of sitting or working here for this 1 hour that we'll be together and just enjoy the privilege of talking about art and theater and being healthy and safe. Continue breathing, clearing your mind. If a thought comes to your mind, gently but firmly push it away and just focus on your breath. Breath in, breath out. Feel the sit bones that you're sitting on. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your hands on your lap or on the table in front of you. Ah, the joy of having a body, having a life, of existing in this world. And finish up your breath and go ahead and open your eyes, and hopefully with renewed curiosity about the world and about each other. Um, so I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I will be referring to every once in a while, and I'll go between the PowerPoint and with just me speaking. Um, and once again, at any point, if you have any questions, if you want to ask anything, please let me know. I would love to engage in conversation with you. All right, here we go. I am going to go ahead and share my screen with you so you can see my thing that I have prepared for us. Why is it not extending? Of course, when we try, aha, there it goes. You just need to let it think a little bit. So I wanted to start with this picture of me because I think it really captures who I am and how I do things, how I approach life. This is me at an exhibition. This was an exhibition of bread and puppet theater that we hosted at the University of Connecticut. And the thing behind me, this is not a person, it's just a model of one of their costumes of their performances. And I just got so inspired by the shape, I took the shape in the middle of the exhibit and people talking and mingling. So in a way, this captures who I am. I am curious about life. I'm playful. I approach everything I do with that kind of spirit. What can be done? What can exist? How can I know it better? So that's me right there. A bit of a rebel too. I am Bulgarian-American, and I will tell you just a little bit about my life's journey because I do think it's important to know where I'm coming from, especially in today's day and age when we talk so much about inclusivity, equity. It is, to me, it is really important to continuously know, first of all, where I come from and what I bring to the table and how I can listen better to other people and where they come from and what they bring to the table. So these are all pictures from Bulgaria, actually, even though I've listed here where I have lived, but this is this gives a little idea of where Bulgaria is. It's a very small country between Greece, Turkey, Romania, and Serbia, bordering on the Black Sea. However, it is a very beautiful country, and I'm really, really, it has really enriched my soul and left a lot in me that is very truly Bulgarian. This is the city of Sofia, where I grew up. This is the mountains, the Rila Mountains, the 7 Rila lakes that are very magical. And this is the Bulgarian coast, which is absolutely stunningly beautiful. I have lived here in I've lived in Bulgaria for half of my life and now half of my life here in the United States of America. And in the US, I've lived in the Midwest, in the Southwest, and on the East Coast, which every time has been a completely new adventure, a completely new cultural shock. So I've been shocked many times. And I also lived in London, UK for the time I was getting my degree in, well, it's not a degree, my certificate in Lecoq-based pedagogy. And I have traveled all over the world. I've traveled to Macedonia, Germany, France, Denmark, Belgium, the United States, of course, Japan, Turkey. Japan is the farthest I've gone to the east. And I hope to continue traveling. And it is really, once again, why do I say this? Why does this have to do with my work? It has to do a lot because it is really, I am so curious about people from around the world. I'm so curious about cultures, about rituals, about the way things are done. And they influence my practice. Being in touch with other cultures really influences my practice and actually the way I live my life. things when I went to Japan and just observing the way the Japanese do this, turn the simplest things into an aesthetic pleasure in life, is tremendously influential for me because I live my life this way too. So to find resonance in another culture was really profoundly important to me. So I do have 2 degrees in performance and in directing, actually for the puppet theater from the Bulgarian Academy, the National Academy for Theater and Film Arts. And the most important thing that I'm very proud of this education because the the Bulgarian School of Theater is really famous for the imagination it ignites and actually mandates from its students. We were so creative and so imaginative, and this really sparks creativity. Is actually one of those skills that could be enhanced. It is not something you're just born with and that's it. It is something that you can continue enhancing. And this is what I do in my teaching practice, is that first and foremost, I focus on sparking creativity. Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge because knowledge is limited and imagination is not. So this is something that I hold as a deep belief, and it was ignited in me in my studies in the National Academy. This is me right here wearing a neutral mask at Embodied Poetics in London during the first voyage. And it was an amazing experience that, once again, I'm so grateful for. And this is me in Japan working with a form of puppetry called Otome Bunraku, which is women's puppetry, which I really, really wanted to do when I went to Japan. And this is actually a pretty obscure form of puppetry that it was, first of all, not a lot of people know about it. And second of all, it was extremely difficult to find a sensei to work with me because it is just usually sensei who do Otome Bunraku don't have disciples, don't have students. So it was really hard, but I managed to do it. And I cannot wait to work with her again once the pandemic is over. I have all these plans of maybe bringing her to the US, maybe going back to Japan. We will see. But that's me training. I continue training. When will I ever stop? I don't know. Sometimes I ask myself, it's like, how much more, many workshops and trainings will I take? Which brings me to my artistic practice. And there's so many quotes that guide me in my artistic practice, and I give quotes to my students all the time. And there's one by Georgia O'Keeffe that I hold very, very dear to my heart. And it says, whether you succeed or not is irrelevant. There's no such thing. Making your unknown known is the important thing, and keeping the unknown always beyond you. And why is this important to me? Because making the unknown known is what I strive for as an artist. I use the word poetic very often when I talk about my work, about my teaching, about my performances, because it is the poetic that I am after on stage. It is not the real. We have real life every day. We have a real living room at home. We have real experiences on the street. Life is more real. Theater is more real than reality. Art is artificial. It is one step above. And bringing the unknown to the surface, kind of in the traditions of all the practitioners from the beginning of the 20th century through the middle of the 20th century who inspired us to bring to the surface what was hidden. So this is something that is really, really important to me. And keeping the unknown always beyond you. My professor, Nikolina Georgieva, she is one of the matriarchs. Well, she passed away, but she was the matriarch of Bulgarian puppetry. And she always said, every performance you do, it's like you've never directed before. this is theater is not something you go, oh, I got that, I know this, yeah, I know, I've done it. Every process is different. Every process brings new challenges, and to me, keeping that attitude of always keeping it fresh and the curiosity is really important. Otherwise, I think we become stale. And not only we become stale, but the audiences feel it. And the spark doesn't happen. In my creative practice, I ask these three questions, and actually in my life and in my teaching: what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And how am I doing it? And I always go back to these questions in everything I do, especially as a director and creator of theater. So the what, which will take us to the next slide. The what I do is I create what I have started calling, I go through terminology all the time. I used to call myself a puppet theater artist. Now I call myself a devised visual theater artist. And what is visual theater? Visual theater is something that the way I use it is based on the images and the poetic images of the theatrical expression. It is not rooted in the text. It is rooted in images. Of course, text can exist, but it is not the primary focus and driving force of a performance. And devise pretty much means original. I create theater from scratch. I used to, and I will point out this performance, this performance over here. I hope you see my cursor, which is the same as this. This is The Crane Wife. It is based on a Japanese folk tale. So this was my last show that I created based on a folk tale. I used to create a lot of work based on a folk tale or a myth. The Crane Wife was the last one. The script is 12 pages and the performance is an hour long. So there's so much told through the visuals. This is a good example of what it means, a visual theater. The next images over here, the shadow and this one, the bluish image, are from my production Unfolding, which is the first production I created that is completely original. I had an idea that I want to create a show based on my experience in life as a woman. I find myself in my middle ages, at the prime of my life, looking back to who I was and looking forward to who I'm becoming, and looking at me as a child, me as a young woman, me as a mother me as an artist. And I wanted to follow this trajectory and bring to the surface the key moments of this experience. And this is how Unfolding was created. So it was created in the rehearsal room with the performers. I had a skeleton of an idea, what I wanted to do, segments that I wanted to explore, and together with the performers, we actually gave flesh to this performance. Over here is my new undertaking, The Rule of the World, which is the show is inspired by my personal experiences of injustice with my life. And the idea came to me about almost 3 years ago now. It's been one thing after another that has happened to, I should have opened by now, but here we are, 2020, yay. But it is based on my personal experiences of injustice and unfairness in the world. And the deeper I go into the show, of course, the more things unravel. And we have all witnessed tremendous movement towards talking about and doing something about social justice, which is, of course, this show is inspired by my personal experiences that I hope to transcend to things that apply to other people. It is not taking, I'm not taking the weight of the world on my shoulders, just my little world. And the last one over here, I included this picture. I am collaborating with a performer from Los Angeles, Ian Farley. We met during the last 2 weeks of clown training at Embodied Poetics. And Ian is a Black man, and he is a clown. And he did something on stage. One of the improvisations that we were asked to do during clown was we had to bring an object on stage that represented our clown, and we needed to do improvisation with it. And Ian came on stage, and he pulled out of his pocket. This was not the costume. This is a current rendering of what we're thinking of his costume. But he was dressed in a trench coat with a fedora hat, and he comes on stage, he like detective looking, and he pulls out of his pocket this black scarf, and he lifts it up, and it's such a striking representation of who he is. He's a very tall, thin Black man, and he starts interrogating this black scarf against a brick wall. The back of the studio was a brick wall. And it really punched me in the gut. That is 2019, the fall of 2019. And he finished his improvisation. He came off the stage, and I said, Ian, I want to do the show with you. There's the whole show in what you just did. We need to do this. So we started, oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Months went by. Of course, we were like, oh yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And then when the unrests of early spring, early summer happened this year, we connected, and we were like, we have to do this show. So we're currently working on a show so far entitled the Black Scarf Project, that is going to be a one-man clown show dealing with his experiences, personal experiences, juxtaposed to the experience of Black people in America. So this is what I do. I create work that is very visual. I work with striking visuals. You can see the original scenography. I usually invite Bulgarian designers to work with me because they're so imaginative. I use live music. You can see my musician back here. This is for the Cranewave James Hoskins and all of his instruments. Whenever I can, I use live music. At least the music is originally composed for my work. I use shadow work, I use puppets, I use striking visuals. So everything kind of comes together and creates one very poetic theatrical expression. The next thing I wanted to talk about is why I do it. I have a friend who says, if you have a choice of being an artist, don't even bother, because it is so difficult to be an artist. It is excruciatingly difficult. It's a Sisyphean effort. And so if you have a choice, don't bother, do something else. When I don't create, I feel like my life is sand that's just going between my fingers, and I can't stop it. And I want to stop it. So I pretty much don't have a choice. This is the way I process the world. I am so passionate about doing this. Every time I walk into a theater, I'm like, theater. I love being in the theater. And also I do think that I have something to say. I want to say something. I want to deal with these important themes of presenting the life of a woman on stage, or presenting a show that deals with injustice. I feel compelled and driven to, because I have something to say. And how I do it. That's the big thing about my process, is how I do it. Does anybody have any questions so far? No. Zoom land is quiet. Zombie land. Every time I teach on Zoom, I walk away from class and I don't know, did they get it? Did they not get it? What happened? But I get it. That's our reality. So the few things that I want to talk about my process is that my process is highly collaborative. I assemble a team of interdisciplinary artists. I have performers, designers, musicians, possibly lighting designers, if I can afford them. So it's a highly collaborative process that invites everybody to contribute. I have had my designer give me directing ideas. I'm willing to take it from everybody. And I really strive to empower people to contribute because it is not my show, it is our show. And every day performers have convinced me to do things that originally I said, no, we're never going to do that. So it is very collaborative, a process in which I really want to empower everybody's voice to be heard and to everybody to contribute. I do drive my inspiration from important themes. I guess looking back at everything I've created, the most important things that emerge to me are greed. The theme of The Crane Wife is greed. A huge part of my creativity comes from women's voices to be heard, empowerment of women. I work with primarily female teams, women's teams. By choice, I really like working with women and lifting up women, and putting women in positions that are traditionally not occupied by women. So they're not just my performers, they're my designers or my producers or my musicians. Um, and with the last two shows that I am embarking on, it's justice. The idea of justice in the world and seeking justice has become very important to me. Um, I create by a process that is, it is not linear the way traditional theater is created. You have the script and then you talk with the designers and then you have a design and then you come to rehearsal and then you do the show. What I do is I zero in on the theme and some kind of a skeleton. It's like, I want to say these things. And then um, I invite a designer and we start talking about what can embody this, what is the visual representation of this theme. And once we find something, then with those parameters, I invite the performers to create narrative in the room. This is how Unfolding was created in the room. I literally brought a piece of a roll of paper and I said, okay, now we need to create 5 versions of a house and a tree and all of these things that we created and then was turned into theatrical narrative. And then I go back to the designer and I say, okay, we need to have a house, we need to have a tree, we need to have, and then the designer continues to create. So it's a parallel track. And in my ideal world, everybody, all the creators come in the room together and they cross-pollinate. In the final stages of the rehearsal of Unfolding, we actually had the performers, the designer, the composer, and the lighting designer in the room during rehearsals. The designer was ready to respond to the performers' needs on the spot. Of course, most of it existed, but like they needed another magnet here, or can you tie this, or this is not quite working. And the designer was hopping constantly on the stage to help the performers, to support the performers. The musician was composing on the spot and saying, okay, watching the improvisation of the performers and saying, okay, I'm ready to show you guys something. What do you guys think about that? He would play it and we would respond. The performers would say, oh yeah, that works. And I would say, yeah, that works, or no, this won't work. So it was, and then the lighting designer was watching us rehearse, was making the plan of when we walk into the theater, what they're gonna do. So very highly collaborative process that goes back and forth between creation, design. So different parts of the process advance simultaneously. This is a very demanding process. This is a process that takes me, because I also self-produce my work. I fundraise for my work, I self-produce, I find a venue to perform. Usually, one of my shows takes me at least 2 years to put on its feet. By the time I fundraise and I have any kind of funding to start assembling a team, between going into the rehearsal room to, I mean, I call it the studio laboratory, to begin devising, and then figuring out the ideas with the designers, it takes about 2 years to create this kind of work. And I've calculated it takes me about 1,200 to 1,300 hours to do this work. So it's kind of like writing a book, which was in my, it was so funny. Some people, like some of my more traditional colleagues, especially who don't work in theater at the University of Connecticut, couldn't even wrap their heads around what I do. It's like, what do you do again? It's like, it was so bizarre to them, this whole world of puppetry, which so often in the US, puppetry is either associated with sock puppets, with the Muppets, or Warhorse and the Lion King. This is kind of like the only expressions of puppetry most Americans are familiar with, really, and some have never seen it in their entire lives. So, any questions so far? Kimberly, do we have a little bit more time, or should we go towards questions and answers?
If you have some other things to talk about your work, you can do that. I would love to hear a little bit more about what drew you to puppetry over other forms.
That's a very interesting question. Well, do you know what? Let's engage in some more interactive. Let me very quickly pencil that, I mean, pin that question. I wanted to very briefly say that the interplay of form and content is kind of the hallmark of my work. And I'm really, this is where I'm really fine tuning my work. The form and content, they have to create one cohesive vision. And I can talk more about that with this. I have examples from Unfolding, from The Rule of the World, and from, oh, this is me and Ian. This is our London. So we can, I'll stop sharing for now. We can go back to this if we have time, but let's engage in questions and answers. I think I've said enough. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for now. We can always go back to these if you have questions, especially. So what drew me to puppetry? This is very interesting. I haven't thought about it in a long time. I actually come from a family of biologists, and both my mother and my father were biologists, and I had no connection to the arts in that sense of a viable career path. I was, we had friends, but we would go to the opera or the theater, but nothing as a career. And then speaking of friends, my parents had a friend who was teaching at the National Academy. And one day she heard me sing. I do sing. And she heard me sing and she said, "Do you know that you have some artistic talent?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And she's like, "Have you ever thought of pursuing, applying to the National Academy?" And I was like, "No," because getting into the National Academy was extremely difficult. It was pretty much impossible to get in. The auditions were so fierce. And she's like, "I think you can do it. I think you have the chops to do it." And I was so clueless, but she helped me prepare for the exams. I got in, but she said, "Oh, but you need to study puppetry, because in the puppet department, they do everything the drama performers do. They just do it with more imagination." And it was really true. We were trained as performers. We had speech, voice, singing, acrobatics, movement. It was a conservatory training that was just like the actors training, and we had puppet classes. So that's what I did. I applied for the puppet department. I got in, and the rest is history. I was really hooked. I love the form. I love how expansive it is. It is puppetry can be anything from a mask to a stick on stage. As long as somebody's animating a stick, that's puppetry. Seeing your reflections on the wall and playing with them, shadows, puppetry. Arguably, it is the oldest form of theater. When people saw their shadows on the walls, or they donned an animal hide to present, to become an animal, puppetry. So I'm really hooked to the form. And I love that question. Thank you for this awesome question.
So everybody else, if you'd like to ask a question, we've got one in the chat. Ann Campbell says, you mentioned culture shock in each place. What was your culture shock for the Midwest?
Oh boy, can I plead the fifth? No, actually, the Midwest was the first place we arrived because my husband's family lived in the Midwest when we came from Europe. We came from Europe together, and we had absolutely zero money. Now we have hundreds of dollars with our artistic careers, but we had to stay with his parents, and I guess I was 22. I was 22 and I was married, and I came to the US without having a clue what I'm getting myself into. Um, Maybe the isolation between people. I came from the city and they lived in rural Ohio, where there were like no places. You couldn't just walk out of your house and walk somewhere. This continues to be something that I don't like about my life here. I love, well, Iowa City has been great. I can walk out of my door, but maybe the isolation, the distances between things and people. Um, that's what's coming to my mind the most. And it's so funny because after so many years, after almost 20 years, I am back in the Midwest now as a Grant Wood Fellow. And I am kind of relearning some things, even though I'm still isolated, but for different reasons now. But it's like, is this a Midwestern thing, or is this the way people are? I'm like starting, is it like there's a politeness and kindness to people at the same time? Sometimes you're like, do they really mean it? Or are they just being polite to get me off their back? So probably these things.
I'm curious as to when you put on your different productions in different places, like Unfolding was put on in the US and Turkey and Bulgaria. Did they become completely different productions because of the teams you assembled?
Well, actually, it's the same team. I just traveled to different places with it. But actually, yes, I'll speak to both of these things. First of all, with Unfolding, we had an original team, and then I had to replace the team, and then I had to replace the team again, because sustaining a company in the United States, it's so difficult. People's lives change. So I had to change the company twice. Yes, the show becomes different every time with different people. Absolutely. And that was actually something I was like, you guys, this is your show now. So a lot of the things stayed the same. Of course, the show existed, but especially the last cast with which I worked in New York, these women were so talented and so passionate about puppetry and the work. They elevated the show to a whole new level that I've always wanted to see it at. And they really brought it there. The other thing that I really want to mention is, since you mentioned Turkey, performing in Turkey was incredible because it's a Muslim country. It's a country that is different than my Eurocentric way of looking at the world, or Western way of looking at the world. The show is about women and empowerment of women. So I was a little bit nervous. How will the show be accepted, received, perceived? And I was amazed because the audiences just loved it and were so open, um, and actually accepted it better than some European audiences, which is once again, where are the expectations of what, oh, if we perform there, that's how it will be. You just don't know. And it was incredible. I working in Turkey, I absolutely loved. And there was actually a conference of poets at the same time happening as this puppet festival was happening, and a bunch of women poets and writers came to see the show, and they came to us after the show, and we just engaged in this amazing conversation about women and writing our lives. And they told me about philosophical ideas, and this is what I love. This is why I do my art. I live for these moments where audiences come to you and say, I saw my life on stage. I cried, I wept, I laughed. And yes, so the show does become different with each iteration. It has to move forward, it has to evolve, and also performing it in different places is different every time.
We've got another question from the audience. How do you keep your creative spark going?
Jeez, Louise. Oh, God. Um, I don't know. Sometimes there are days when it gets so hard. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I doing this to myself? Um, and then I just, because I love it so much, because it's something, as I said, I don't have a choice of being an artist. When we were doing the show in New York, and it was such a, once again, effort out of this world, me schlepping suitcases full of puppets on the subway in the slush in February, for rehearsals, putting up everything by myself because I couldn't afford a stage manager, like arriving 2 hours before the performers so everything can be ready for them. And then in the final week of before the show opened, the guy who I've been talking about doing lighting for me suddenly goes, oh, by the way, I'll do the lighting, but I will not be there running the lighting for the shows. You're clear on that, right? And I called my husband, and I was like walking the streets of New York going, I can't do this. I can't do this. Why am I doing this? I'm calling it quits. And my husband at this point knows. He's like, okay, let's take a deep breath. And, by the next day I was in rehearsal figuring it out. So I don't know. I guess I believe in something good inside of all of us, and I believe in, you know, as silly as that sounds, making the world a better place. And that's how I can do it, and that's why I do it. So that's how I keep the spark going.
We've got another question. This one's from Emma. Can you give an example of creating a poetic image that ends up in a show in the devising that you do?
Beautiful, beautiful question. Oh my gosh, there's so many. The rule of the world hasn't happened yet, so I'll talk more about unfolding, but everything in that show, every single moment on stage is poetic because it's backed by mythology, by perceptions, by personal experiences, that are transposed on the stage. There's not a single beat that is not. So a specific moment when there's a moment where the Aya is the name of the puppet, the main character. Her childhood after she's born, she appears in a little house. And if you get on my website, you can see images. But there's a little house. And the chimney, I wanted the chimney to be crooked. How children, I remember when I was little, you draw the chimney this way, not straight up. And then out of this chimney, as Aya's sitting on the roof of her house. She climbs on the roof of her house and sits and looks at the world. There's this smoke that's made out of actually a piece of Tyvek, a very thin piece of smoke, a literal smoke comes out and is just being moved by the performers and this is what I mean by poetic. The audience see this is not real smoke. It's not realism. It's a piece of cloth, a piece of, and it ends, right? It's only this long or whatever long it is. But the image that it creates, it's a palpable image of a smoke that comes out of a child's drawing. So the idea, it's like a transposition on the stage for the puppet. It is her real life, but for the audience, it's transposed. It's children's drawing. It's children's naivete. It's a child's imagination, and this is how it is more real than real. If I had real smoke, high-tech real smoke, it would be less poetic than a piece of string that is being moved by a beautiful performer that animates it, and we see the smoke. So the show is like, every image in the show is like that.
That sounds beautiful. George is asking, can you elaborate on some of the human tensions that you feel need deeper investigation and exploration?
Oh, Jesus, you guys are asking these profound questions. Well, as I said, my new show is, I'll talk about now the role of the world. And this is how I'm understanding the question. I hope I'm understanding it correctly. So the idea of justice and injustice, I have experienced my own, right? I'm an immigrant. I'm a woman. I've experienced so many layers. I cannot claim to have experienced things that Indigenous or Black people have. That's not my realm. At the same time, I've experienced my own. And I found this quote from John Lewis recently, that when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up, you have to say something, you have to do something. So this is what I'm doing. And the way I'm structuring the rule of the world, there will be 3 segments to the show. It is about the protagonist is a woman portrayed by a puppet. And we're going to witness 3 important moments of her life. The one is when she arrives in the land of opportunity, which will be poetically represented by an obstacle course. And you saw the images. I can share my screen really quickly. Oh no, this one. If you look back, I'll keep talking while it's loading. There's an obstacle course. Then there's that represents the land of opportunity, and she's told, oh, you can do anything, you just need to get from here to here. But then suddenly the game changes. The performers, well, this is not going to work, so I'm going to stop sharing. I can't click it. Why can I not click it? Stop sharing. It's not worth it. Then the game changes. The game is rigged. Suddenly, oh, no, you cannot cross this way. This is only for the people who have fancy degrees. Or, oh, if you have money, yes, you can enter this way. But if you don't, you can still get to the top. You just need to take a little longer route. So this is the land of opportunity section. Once again, very literally and poetically represented by an obstacle course that she needs to navigate. The second one is building a dream. She says, I will build my own dream. So she starts constructing this house. And, she, once again, that talks about we each have the right to build a dream. And suddenly, some inspectors come. I see this very surrealistic moment where these inspectors come and say, oh, you have no permission to build this dream. This is not a land that is allotted for dream building, and you're 1 centimeter over the line. So they're going to tell her that they're going to demolish her dream, and she chooses to destroy it herself. And then she says, no, this is not right. So she goes into like a Don Quixotean battle, that it will be a windmill, that she fights the system Oh, I need to fight for my right to pursue happiness, and she gets demolished by the system. And then we end the show on a hopeful note, which I want to do is, I found the paradoxical commandments that say people are unreasonable, illogical, they will stab you in the back, you need to love people anyway. So these are the themes that I find that need to continue being explored, these ideas that we all face. We live in a very flawed world with very flawed people. We're all flawed, and how do we keep loving it? How do we keep giving it our best even though the world kicks us in the teeth? So this is kind of my driving force.
Thank you, Margarita. I think that's a good place to stop. We'll have Margarita back in the spring for another talk, a lecture about her work, and I'm sure we'll hear more about the role of the world at that one.
We'll see.
We have another Grant Wood Fellow who's going to be bringing us into their studio next week. Next Tuesday, Elena Smirniakis is going to have a studio visit, and we can see her current work, Labyrinth. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at our future programs.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I only wanted to say I'm very curious about people. I love exchanging conversations with people over coffee, over a glass of wine. So please, if you want to reach out to me, I am more than happy to talk to anybody about anything. So don't be strangers.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.